Since ancient times, humans have invented the most cruel and sophisticated ways to inflict pain. Some tortures were used to punish criminals, others to extract confessions, and others to intimidate. In this video, we delve into the dark history of human cruelty and look at the most terrible tortures that were used in different areas and cultures. There is a so-called the pain frequency severity duration scale, which measures pain on a scale from 0 to 140. Live entombment, a slow and agonizing death. Live entombment, also known as walling in, was a form of punishment or execution in which a person was sealed inside a confined space, such as a wall or a small room, with no way to escape. Once trapped, the victim would die from suffocation, starvation, or dehydration. This method was widely practiced in ancient times, especially in ancient Rome and Greece, as a severe punishment for criminals and political enemies. During the Middle Ages, it was commonly used to punish women and religious figures accused of immorality or heresy. Beyond the physical suffering, live entombment inflicted immense psychological torment. The awareness of inevitable death in complete isolation caused overwhelming terror and despair. If the space was completely sealed, death would occur within hours due to suffocation. In some cases, a small air hole was left, prolonging the victim's suffering for several days without food or water. This method was one of the most excruciating forms of execution, as it combined slow physical deterioration with severe psychological torture. Historical examples: Ancient Egypt. In some cases, the servants and concubines of pharaohs were entombed alive alongside their deceased ruler. Ancient Rome. Vestal virgins, priestesses of Vesta, who broke their vow of chastity, were buried alive in underground chambers with only a piece of bread and water. China and India. Criminals were sometimes sealed within palace or temple walls, occasionally as ritual sacrifices. Medieval Europe, used by the Inquisition and feudal lords to execute traitors, heretics, and nuns who violated their vows. 60 out of 140. A method of execution that inflicted long-lasting physical agony and intense psychological distress. Sleep deprivation. Deliberate sleep deprivation has been used for centuries as a form of torture and an interrogation technique. As a method of questioning, it has been widely employed by the British, American, and Irish armies, in East Africa during apartheid, and in Japanese prisoner of war (POW) camps. References to this method can also be found in accounts of witch hunts in Scotland. The essence of the technique lies in preventing a person from sleeping through various means, such as forcing them into uncomfortable positions, exposing them to loud noises, bright lights, or other disturbing stimuli. Severe or extreme sleep deprivation can lead to hallucinations, psychosis, and schizophrenia, making it one of the most terrifying psychological and physical tortures. However, its effectiveness as an interrogation method is questionable, as one of the first symptoms of sleep deprivation beyond 24 hours is memory confusion and distorted perception of reality. This form of torture scales 70 points on the Pain Frequency Severity Duration (FSD) scale. Swedish drink, a brutal form of torture. The Swedish drink was a cruel method of torture that involved forcibly filling the victim's stomach with excessive amounts of liquid, leading to excruciating pain, vomiting, ruptured internal organs, and even death. This technique was used in Sweden during the 17th century, particularly during the 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648, mainly against peasants and enemy soldiers. Method of torture. The victim was force-fed liquid, which could be water, urine, liquid filth, or even excrement. A funnel or tube was sometimes inserted into the throat to facilitate the process. The stomach expanded to a critical point, causing intense pain, bloating, and the potential rupture of internal organs. Some victims died from stomach rupture or suffocation if liquid entered the lungs. Historical use. Despite its name, this torture was not exclusive to Sweden and was practiced in other countries. France, 18th century, used occasionally against prisoners. Nazi Germany, 20th century. Reports suggest that similar methods were used in concentration camps. Final score, 87 out of 140. A highly painful and humiliating method of torture that inflicted both physical agony and psychological horror. Execution by elephant. In India, elephants were used not only in war, but also for public executions. The condemned was brought to the square, where a trained elephant carried out the executioner's orders. Quick death. At the command of the ruler, the elephant would trample the head or chest, instantly killing the victim. Slow execution. The elephant could gradually break the victim's limbs, playing with them before delivering the fatal blow. Some elephants were trained to throw a person into the air, trample on him, or even tear the body, stepping on different parts of the body in turn. This method of execution was used by the Mughals, the Gupta dynasty, the Delhi Sultanate, as well as in Burma and Thailand. Elephants were considered the ideal instrument of justice, since they could either punish or spare. If the ruler changed his mind, the elephant stopped attacking. This sophisticated and unusual method of execution scores 95 points on the scale. Judas Cradle. The Judas Cradle was a particularly painful and humiliating form of torture. The victim was forced to sit on a pyramid-shaped seat, with the tip pointing directly at the anus or genital area. The person was then strapped to the device, often with their hands and feet tied to prevent movement. As the victim sat on the pyramid, their own weight would cause them to be slowly impaled. Over time, this would cause severe internal injuries, including damage to internal organs and blood vessels. The victim would experience excruciating pain as the tip of the pyramid slowly tore through sensitive tissue, causing extreme physical suffering. The victim could either die from physical injury or suffer prolonged agony, as the torture could last for hours, days, or even longer if the torturer chose to prolong it. This device was used during the Inquisition and medieval Europe to extract confessions, punish criminals, and humiliate people. It was usually used on heretics, blasphemers, or those accused of witchcraft. The Judas Cradle was a method designed to break both the body and the spirit, causing extreme physical pain, while simultaneously forcing the victim into a state of complete vulnerability and helplessness. 100 out of 140 on the pain scale. Yubitsume is the practice of cutting off a finger phalanx in the Japanese Yakuza. This ritual serves as a punishment for misdeeds, or as a way to atone for guilt before the boss or group. A person must cut off the outer phalanx of his little finger himself. A traditional sharp tanto knife is used for the ritual. The cut-off piece of the finger is wrapped in cloth or paper and given to the boss as a sign of repentance. If a person continues to make mistakes, he cuts off the next phalanges or other fingers. This method of torture is not only physically difficult, but also mentally. After all, the victim must cause pain to himself. The reason why it is the little finger that is cut off is historical. In the old days, the samurai's main weapon was always a sword, and without the little finger, the sword cannot be held tightly, because the grip of the little finger is the strongest on the handle. On the pain scale, this torture corresponds to 110 out of 140 points. Rat torture. One of the most ancient methods of torture. The first confirmed cases were in the 1st century in the Roman Empire. In Rome, they used rat plagues to torture prisoners, leaving them in locked cellars with hundreds of hungry rodents who ate them alive. In ancient China, there was an execution in which the victim was tied up and became completely immobilized, and rats were locked in an iron vessel placed on the victim's stomach or chest. Then a fire was lit under the vessel, and the rats, maddened by the heat, gnawed their way through the person's flesh. In Europe, particularly in France and England in the Middle Ages, people were dressed in large puffy pants, made of thick material, into which rats were released. Due to the lack of air, they tried to get out, but it was impossible for them to gnaw through the material. They began to eat human flesh. If you think that this torture ceased to exist in the Middle Ages, you are mistaken. In South American countries, as early as the 20th century, during military dictatorships, rats were used as an instrument of psychological and physical violence. They were stuffed into metal pipes and forced to penetrate the bodies of the victims. It was also common practice to put a metal cage over a person's face and release rodents into it. This method was considered one of the most excruciating, as it combined physical pain, psychological horror, and slow death. This type of torture on the scale scores almost a maximum of 135 out of 140, since the victim understands during torture that he has practically no chance of survival. Bamboo torture is one of the most brutal and creative torture methods used in ancient China and other parts of Asia. The victim was tied to the ground or laid on the ground, and young bamboo shoots were placed on their body, usually on the stomach or chest. Since bamboo grows incredibly quickly, up to 10 centimeters per day, its shoots gradually penetrated the victim's body, piercing it until the bamboo reached the internal organs. The bamboo's growth could be so rapid that it caused severe pain, internal injuries, and eventually death due to organ damage or infection. Since the process took several days, the victim died slowly and painfully, making the torture even more horrific. This method was extremely effective because it left no visible marks or wounds, making it virtually undetectable to onlookers, while still causing excruciating pain and suffering. Some victims died simply from shock during the first hours of bamboo growth. This sophisticated torture scores 137 points on the scale.